Namaste, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another session of Yoga Insights. I'm Sophie French from Indica Yoga. So this evening's Yoga Insights will feature the co-founder and primary teacher of the Kula Kamla Foundation, Swamini Shraddhananda Saraswati ji. So Shraddha ji holds 5 educational degrees, including a doctorate in anthropology and biological archaeology. And she has also authored 3 books of spiritual poetry and reflection, celebrating our connection to the goddess, God, and to one another. In today's session, she will talk about what a spiritual path is and the 10 integral steps on the spiritual path of yoga. Shraddha ji, would you like to join the session, please? Namaste.
Namaste, Sophie. Thank you so much for having me today. And namaste to everybody and to Koti ji for his work technologically behind the scenes. Very nice to be with you.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to hand over this session to you now, and I'll see all of you towards the end when we open for a Q&A. Thank you.
Wonderful. Hari Om, and hello, everyone. So good to see you all here today. And it is very uplifting to know that so many hearts have such an interest in a spiritual path and in things that we might be able to do in order to deepen that spiritual path. So let's begin with a little bit of an invocation. I will chant 3 mantras, and if you know them, please do join. Just join the hands together in front of the heart, close the eyes, and take a moment to connect with your breath, connect with the source, connect with your intention for our session today. And we'll chant Om. Om. And the Ganapati Prarthana. Ganana antva Ganapati gum hava mahe kavin kavinam upamashravastamam jestarajam brahmanan Brahmanaspata anavshrinvanuti pisidhasadhanam Mahaganapataye namaha. And the Devi Prarthana. Prano Devi Saraswati Vache Bhirvajini Vati Tina Mavitriyavatu Ano Devo Brahataf Parvata Da Saraswati Ajata Gantu Yagnyam Havan Devi Jujushana Gritachi Shagman Nova Chamushati Shrinotu Vagdevyai Namaha. And the All Beings Mantra. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Om shanti shanti shanti. And then releasing the hands down, gently fluttering the eyes open. And so we begin our session today with these beautiful mantras because there are, at a very minimum, 3 things that we should maintain in our hearts and in our minds on a very practical level. We'll get to the more esoteric level in a little bit. But the first thing is that we chant the sound Om in order to remind ourselves of the unflinching unity, the beautiful sacred oneness that is this universe and beyond. And so every time that we invoke Om, we are reminding ourselves on a subconscious as well as a conscious level of this unity. But we understand that we're human beings and that in our humanness, we are inevitably going to experience obstacles. We're going to stumble, we're going to make mistakes, we're going to struggle in our journey. And so we invoke Ganapati and we ask for Ganapati's protection. And we say, in the event that I do not have the solution within my own actions and my own intentions, please support me. Come to me and show me the way beyond these obstacles, either by removing them or empowering within me the wisdom to remove them myself. And then we invoke the Devi, the Divine Mother, in order to request her protection. But in this particular instance, it's the Saraswati Prarthana. So we're asking for wisdom and for the ability to hold that wisdom, to keep that wisdom alive in our hearts and minds. So what we learned today, or what we review today, for some of you, this may be more of a review. May we hold that, carry it, and implement it more often even than we already are. May she bless us. May she shower us with her gifts and her grace. And then the Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu, the all beings mantra, as it's sometimes called, is a reminder that we are here to be in service of one another, and that the intention, the wish for all beings is that suffering be alleviated. But we can't stop there. We can't just simply say, I wish for all beings to be free of suffering. We need to also accept the responsibility of our own behaviors, of our own shortcomings in our relationships. And we need to embody that mantra in such a way that our words, our actions, our intentions all align with the alleviation of suffering. And that truly is a great service to all beings everywhere. So when we come to a spiritual practice, these are a few of the first things that we can be reminded of, that we can remind ourselves of. And so we have ritual in place in order to facilitate that reminder, and also in order to find the gratitude in the moment, the gratitude of the sacred collaboration of self with divinity, of each other. And in addition to that, it awakens inspiration within us. So Om, we invoke the beautiful remembrance of oneness and the divinity that brought that oneness forth. Ganapati Prarthana, we request the removal of obstacles, either by the action of Lord Ganesha, or by the influence of his grace on our own actions. We invoke the Divine Mother, requesting her wisdom and requesting the ability to hold into that wisdom and to live into that wisdom. And then we request the remembrance that we are here to be of service to the end of suffering, not only for ourselves, but for all beings everywhere. And so today we begin with those invocations. Now, today's conversation is focused around a spiritual practice and 10 very important parts of that practice. And I'm certain that none of you are strangers to this conversation, but maybe there'll be a couple of new twists put in there that will pique your interest and deepen your own inquiry about the yamas and the niyamas, the 10 integral virtues to a life of spirituality. But before we start talking about those, let's just talk about a practice of spirituality and what that actually is. So as you may very well know, in Sanskrit, the spiritual practice is called the sadhana. A sadhana is an intention. It is an intentional bringing forward of communication, relationship, and devotion that we say during this time, when I sit in meditation, when I get onto my yoga mat, when I chant, when I am placing flowers or prasads on the altar, that in these times, in these moments, I am diving into this beautiful sacred relationship with divinity. And so our sadhana is the facilitator of that intention. It is what removes the harsh edges and the egotism that can oftentimes keep us away from that relationship or tamper with that relationship so that it's not as deep as perhaps it could be. Our sadhana removes those edges, and it allows us to soften our heart, and it allows us to dive into this relationship until eventually the sadhana goes from being an hour a week or a few hours a week or an hour a day to something that we are living, walking, breathing, thinking all the time. We begin to recognize, the more profoundly we invest in our practice, that it's not just when we're on the meditation cushion, that's a part of it, that's the discipline part. That's the part that keeps the edges soft. That's the part that keeps the ego a little bit more at bay. That's the part where the silence is. But we need to be able to take what we learn on that meditation cushion and walk through the world with it. And when we can begin to do that, then what we will find is that this relationship we are cultivating with divinity is actually the most profound relationship we could ever cultivate. Once that relationship is right, then all other relationships are right. So the sadhana, the spiritual practice, Sri Patanjali in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali stated, he defined a practice for us. He said a practice is something that we engage in continuously over a long period of time with no interruption and with great enthusiasm. So this is very important for us to recognize, because today in our day-to-day life, which is oftentimes very busy, what does he mean by continuously over a long period of time? Is it enough to get on the mat or on the yoga cushion once a week? Is it enough to go to temple or to church once a week? Is that enough? And the answer is, you'll get a little benefit from doing it once a week, but it's like sugar in your coffee or tea. If you put 1 grain of sugar in your coffee or tea, it's not going to do very much at all. The more sugar you put in, the sweeter it becomes. Yeah. So the more energy you put into your practice, the more energy that you put in daily, hourly, every moment, then your benefit from that in this life is going to become tremendous. And this is what Patanjali is telling us. He's saying continuously over a long period, and then the nectar comes, and then the nectar comes. Over a long period of time with little to no interruption. The original text is no interruption, but I always put in there, especially for beginning students, a little bit of interruption here and there if you're sick. You know, if you are in a position where something has happened and you have not yet been able to facilitate your sadhana in every moment of life, then taking that little tiny bit of a break while you're sick so that you can recoup your strength and your focus is actually okay. But then you come back with vigor. Eventually, the student realizes that whether they are healthy or with the flu or something else is happening, that the sadhana is there in every single moment. But for newer students, it's difficult. And I cannot even express how many students have come and said, well, I had the flu last month and I feel so guilty. I feel so bad because I couldn't get on my yoga mat. And I said, well, I think what we really need to look at here is to understand what a sadhana is. You cannot get on your yoga mat because you have the flu. The first question that you can ask yourself is, should I even be getting on the yoga mat if I have the flu? Or is forcing myself to partake in physical, vigorous physical activity while I am that sick actually an act of violence? And the answer to that depends upon the person. But it is a question that we must each ask ourselves so that we can reflect on the quality of our actions and how close they are bringing us or how far they are pushing us away from the integral intention of our sadhana. So very little interruption or no interruption. In the beginning, we think, okay, I'm going to go to yoga class every day. I'm going to go once a week. I'm going to go to temple more often. The continuously with no interruption is when the sadhana becomes your life, and you don't see a difference between being on the yoga mat, on the meditation cushion, or walking through the store, doing your grocery shopping, or talking to your spouse or child, or going to work to provide for your family. There is no difference between these things. Your mind is one pointed and focused into every moment being a divine moment, every moment being an opportunity for that deep sacred relationship between yourself and divinity. And you also recognize that it's everyone else's opportunity as well. So there's many meanings that we can draw from that. We can draw, the first meaning would be the actual physical engagement in some form of physical sadhana or mental sadhana. But then we can also say that as your sadhana progresses, as it becomes deeper in your life experience, it goes from being something you do once in a while to something that is actually living and breathing within you always, continuously, with no interruption, one-pointedness. And with great enthusiasm. It should not be mechanical. It should not be forceful. We shouldn't adopt a yoga asana practice because we want to lose weight. If weight is lost during the practice, it's simply a byproduct. It should not be the first reason why we go. I'm grateful that many people are introduced to yoga as a result of seeking greater health and benefits of yoga, but they would benefit so much more understanding the deeper facets of yoga. And then perhaps that would entice a different lifestyle, which would support the other goals that they have, in addition to the goal of connection and relationship with divinity, with source. So I mentioned earlier, just a few moments ago, the first of the yamas. So Patanjali brought forth in his Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, although he was not the author of these yamas and niyamas, but he wrote them down in a way that we could study them, that we could sit with them and read about them. And the first one that's listed is ahimsa. And so the question of I have a fever of 101. Should I be getting on my yoga mat? I'm having difficulty breathing because of a COVID, situation. Should I be doing very heavy pranayamas? And again, the answer depends upon the person in a very complicated mix of situations. But generally speaking, the first thing that we want to be concerned about is this action I am about to take or that I am engaged in, is it harmful? Is it violent to myself or to someone else? When an individual's life is filled with violent behaviors, when that is our tendency, is to be jealous, envious, reactive, is to be accusatory, and to be knee-jerk reactions, then it's very difficult. It's very difficult for the human mind to live within that tendency of violent outrage and also find peace within their own self. They're diametrically opposed to one another. So the first thing that we can do in deciding that we're going to deepen our sadhana, in deciding that we are going to explore more profoundly what our practice is to see the lifestyle, the mental and emotional tendencies that we carry that are actually opposed to that practice. So where do I behave violently with myself or others? Where do I think violently? Where are my emotions violent? And then in that compassionate inquiry, it's not a matter of looking and saying, I'm a bad person because I feel this way. That's not it at all. It's looking and saying, suffering is present within my body and my mind. And it's not my preference. I don't think it's anybody's preference. What can I do to alleviate that suffering? The first cause of suffering, and there's another first cause too, but for the purpose of this conversation, the first cause of suffering is our own violent action. So to look at that compassionately and say, okay, so where do I behave this way? And then to start reining that in and evolving it, not sweeping it under the carpet, not denying it, not trying to pretty it up, but actually facing it. And where we need to make atonements, making atonements, and where we need to make changes, acquire the tools necessary to make the changes so that we can evolve into a more peaceful, calm, kind individual, so that we are less reactive. Now, that first one in and of itself, in my humble opinion, is huge. It is the key. Because when we are reactive individuals, when we are violent individuals, and if we eat our food violently, that's an insult to our physical body and to the food that we're eating. So something that day-to-day mundane can also be brought to a place of much greater meaning. But when we're behaving violently, when that is our tendency, there's a lot of energy being wasted there. And so if you're relating to this at all, if you're saying to yourself, oh yeah, I'm so tired all the time and I'm so frustrated and angry all the time, well, maybe there's a relationship between the frustration, the anger, and the tiredness. And perhaps if we each take time to acquire the skill necessary to change our anger, to change our frustrations, to work with them, to evolve them into something else, then we will find that we're actually saving energy. We become more rested physically and mentally and emotionally. We become more present. Our minds begin to think more clearly, and we become enthusiastic and even happy. And in that enthusiasm and happiness, our practice takes on an even deeper meaning. There's such a thing as a wicked cycle. Well, this is a beautiful cycle that builds upon itself, similarly to the way the wicked cycle builds upon itself. So you begin to inquire about nonviolence, about ahimsa, and you begin to see that, oh, a little bit of change really does go a long way here. A little bit of change really does uplift the mood and alleviate the burden that's on the shoulders and in the heart. And so maybe if I do a little bit more, and then a little bit more, and then a little bit more. And in that regard, we build a resiliency with ahimsa. We build the resiliency necessary. We build the faith in ahimsa. We see the purpose of it and the importance of it, and it continues upon itself. So nonviolence. I want to say a little something about each one of the yamas and niyamas. So I will move next into asteya. Asteya, non-stealing, which is a component of nonviolence, isn't it? Because if you take something that doesn't belong to you, it's a very violent act. There's a lot of different ways that people steal. The first way is perhaps taking money or, a physical object that is not yours to have. But there are other ways of stealing also that people tend to engage in. Stealing the limelight, stealing someone else's attention or affection, taking credit where credit is not due. As an example, on Facebook nowadays, there's a huge problem with plagiarism. Right? People taking quotes and poetry and writings and putting them up in a way that it looks like they wrote it. Now, if you think about the mindset behind such an action, it took a little bit of energy, perhaps even a lot, for that person to think about, I like this poem. This poem has meaning for me. I'm going to post it, and maybe people will think that I'm the author of that, that's who I am. There's a lot that can be said about that as far as the concept of ignorance of the truth of the self. But for the purposes of this conversation, we look at that type of an action and we say the energy that went into either that type of a decision to provide false information, about the author and to take credit where credit is not due, or even the ignorance of just not being bothered with accrediting an author appropriately. That's a lot of energy to have to reconcile within oneself. And the energy that is being spent reconciling these avoidable mistakes is energy that is not being used in your devotion. The energy that is being used to feel guilty, to feel distraught, to tell oneself the story over and over and over again, to worry, all of these things, the energy being placed in that realm is energy that is not being placed in your devotional practice. So a stay is very important. We should always credit. We see this in the yoga world today too. It's such an issue, appropriation, and there are people and teachers who are making a lot of money who are writing books and making documentaries about yoga, but they're focusing on a more modern westernized version of it, and they don't often enough, and sometimes they don't at all, acknowledge the origins of yoga. They will not talk about the ancient times, the teachers, the sages, the rishis, the rishikas, the Vedas, the Upanishads, the role that this beautiful tradition of Sanatana Dharma plays in the propelling forward of the yoga and the yoga practices. And as a matter of fact, oftentimes they won't even move beyond yoga as a physical practice. So this is a lot of energy that ends up making people tired, feeling burnt out, frustrated, competitive, egotistical, and it's energy that they are not putting toward their spiritual practice. So coming into right relationship with asteya, very, very important, extremely important. The next yama, satya. Satya, truthfulness, goes hand in hand with asteya, goes hand in hand with ahimsa. To lie is very violent. It's very violent. To outwardly lie, very violent. And oftentimes when we're in the practice of stealing, we're lying. We're telling a story to other people so that we don't get caught in the act of stealing. So this type of non-truthfulness, this type of deception, again, very, very wasteful of one's own energy. You tell one little white lie, and you have to tell 100 other little white lies to fulfill that first white lie. And then pretty soon you have an avalanche of white lies, and you're in the midst of a storm wondering, when am I going to mess up with the details? Don't be bothered with the white lies. Don't be bothered. Just be truthful. And if you made a mistake, acknowledge the mistake. And if you did something inappropriate or incorrectly, then fix it. Fix it as best you can. And this way, your energy can go toward the direction of your spiritual relationship rather than into the worry of, when am I going to get found out? There's other ways of stealing also. It's not just, of non-truthfulness. It's not just telling lies. It's also a form of denial. So for example, when an individual would have a tendency to say, well, I can't get on my yoga mat more than once a week. I just don't have the time. The more accurate statement there is, I will not make the time to get on my yoga mat, because we all have plenty of time to get on the yoga mat, the meditation cushion, or go to the temple. So it's not that we can't, it's that we won't. We won't turn the television off. We won't shorten the phone call. We won't sit online shopping, stop going online to shop in order to be able to go spend more time in ritual. So we need to own that. We need to be truthful about it and say, in this moment, I'm making an informed choice because I know I can turn the television off and I can go sit over there on my meditation cushion, but I am choosing not to. I'm choosing not to. And perhaps that acknowledgement, that truthful acknowledgement of the power of preference between the graspings of this materialized world and the divine relationship that the heart is longing for, perhaps being truthful with oneself about how strong the preferences are and how much power those preferences have over us will actually empower us to overcome the preferences to some degree. So truthfulness, very, very important. And then I suppose also, there's this higher level truth. And the higher level truth is acknowledging oneness, the unity between us, and acknowledging the Dharma, the truth, the way, the wisdom of divinity, and living by that, studying that, breathing that, and being that. And so each one of these yamas and niyamas, they have kind of this first practical level, and then they have the level for the spiritual inquiry, the individual who is very much involved in their own inquiry. And then there's this kind of higher level. So the higher level of nonviolence is to be peace, 24/7, to be peace, to be passive, to be non-aggressive in any manner whatsoever, to be completely generous, to be completely kind, to be at one with all beings. This highest level of non-stealing is, as Swami Shraddhananda would often say, Give, give, give. If you have something, give it away. Give it to the person who needs it, because you have what you need. So why are you accumulating when there are others who are suffering because they don't have what they need? And so this highest level is to see everything that comes to us as an opportunity to be generous to others. Highest level of satya, recognizing the truth of oneness and the truth of divinity. The fourth yama is brahmacharya. And interestingly, brahmacharya very closely entwined with the energetics of the first three. Brahmacharya is traditionally abstinence. So abstinence from sexual behavior. That would apply mostly to an individual who has taken vows of renunciation. But what about the householder? Well, obviously, there is appropriate relationship, appropriate physical relationship with the individual that you have that relationship with. And then there's also this economy of all of your energy. So reining in the energy that would typically go out in violent acts, in acts of thievery, in acts of dishonesty, reining all that energy in, bringing that back to yourself, not expending your energy in ways that are depleting and tiring, that keep you away from your relationship with divinity. Changing very much life and the way that life is lived. Economy of energy. Brahmacharya is a very important word also, because when you break brahmacharya down, Brahma is divinity. Brahma is that consciousness of the universe, is the source of all that is. And charya can be defined as to be like or to be a student of. So to practice brahmacharya is to be like God, to study God, to study that, to be like that, to embody that. And in order to embody that, we cannot be expending our energy in ways that are futile or wasteful. And to some students, that may sound very boring. Like, oh, I like the excitement and the drama of this life. But how do you know there's not excitement and drama on the other end of this? If you haven't been there, you don't know. And perhaps the happiness of the knowledge of the self, perhaps the happiness that exists there is far, far, far more powerful and far, far, far more long-lasting than the little bits that we get in this materialized world. Aparigraha is the fifth of the yamas, and this is non-grasping. And it goes right along with the first four. It's what are we grasping at and why? Are we grasping at cigarettes or alcohol? Are we grasping at food or shopping? Are we grasping at other people? Are we grasping at blame? Are we grasping at self-loathing? What is it that we're grasping at? Because whatever we grasp at means that there's something else that we cannot hold. Interestingly, primatologists did this study. They wanted to find out how quickly, I believe it was chimpanzees, would catch on to this idea that if they put one thing down, they can get something else. So they took a series of jars and they put a banana or a piece of fruit in the jar. And the primate was able to put their hand into the jar, grasp onto the fruit, and they couldn't pull it out because with their hand and the fruit, their hand became too big to get out. And all they had to do was let go. All they had to do was let go, but they didn't. Not one let go. They just kept grasping. So if what we're worried about when we're grasping is that we don't have enough, or that we're going to miss out on something, again, we're going to inhibit our own ability to find out just how much we actually do already have, to see it in a truer light, to experience the true abundance of the universe, because we're worried about one little banana or one little apple. That's what we're looking at. We're one-pointed, but in a very unfortunate way, because if we lifted our head up and looked out, if we looked inward, what we would find is that there's so many reasons to have our hands wide open, to be receiving so much natural abundance, to be receiving so much love, to be receiving so much compassion, so much grace from the Divine Mother, from the Divine Father, from that which is beyond. And in allowing ourselves to receive that, we can share it with others too. But as long as our hands are in fists, we will not be sharing. We will not be sharing, not from a pure heart. Sometimes we'll give stuff away, try to make ourselves feel a little better. But it's only when the hands and the heart are open, the mind is open, and then grace flows through. And then our actions take on a whole different level of meaningfulness and sincerity. From here, we come to the niyamas. And so the niyamas, the first saucha, cleanliness, obviously is to keep your body and your mind clean, to keep your space clean. And if you are a practitioner of yoga, and if you have studied Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, or you have read the Bhagavad Gita, you know that in there, Krishna tells Arjuna, the practice space of a yogi should be clean and uncluttered. But in addition to that, the mind of the yogi should be clean and uncluttered, and the physical body of the yogi should be clean and uncluttered. So this cleanliness goes beyond just taking a shower every day. This cleanliness goes into, what is the quality of the thoughts that I'm thinking? Are they tainted somehow? And it's not just a matter of are they, some people say dirty thinking, when an individual is hyper-focused on sexuality or something, but it's also thinking nastily about people, thinking in a very, very negative way about anything at all. The cleanliness of the mind is inhibited when we are retelling stories of gossip in our mind, when we're pointing our inner finger at people outside of ourselves and saying, oh, that person dresses funny, or that kid is a little, whatever, or this person over here, or that. When we're busy with those types of nasty thoughts, then that energy is inhibiting our mental clarity. And it's taking away energy that we could be putting into mantra and prayer. So here's a little practice that you can take forward in your life. Every time you catch yourself in a nasty thought about either yourself or someone else, stop and actively choose a mantra to chant. Chant the Mahamri Chanjaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Shri Durgaye Namaha, Om. Chant instead of continuing with that thought. And what you'll find is that you'll feel much better about yourself. You'll feel much better about whoever else happens to be involved. And you'll also have more enthusiastic energy moving forward, because you won't be bogged down by grief and anger and resentment and regret. Those types of emotions are very, very depleting. And the more we feel those, the less we're going to feel like we deserve to sit on that meditation cushion. The less we're going to feel we deserve, not deserve in an egotistical way, but we will feel we don't deserve it. We'll feel we're not good enough, that we lack. And therefore, it's not okay to go to temple. It's not okay to go to church, because we won't feel that we deserve to be there. The reality is, in those moments, we need it more than ever. We do. If we show up with a sincere heart, no matter the mistakes we've made, no matter the number of excuses that we've given ourselves, the grace of divinity will be there to lift us up. And it's important that we remember that. There are a lot of people out there who talk about grace and about God as being a punitive, angry energy. But you cannot be a punitive, angry energy and be love at the same time. And there, in the teachings, God is love. Divinity is love. The goddess is love. A deep, wonderful compassion and stillness. So let us open up our hands, our hearts, and our minds. Let us change the qualities that we have a tendency to take part in. And let us uplift our intentions and cultivate a space within and around ourselves that is conducive to that sacred relationship. As I mentioned earlier, once our relationship with divinity is set right, then our relationship with all beings will be set right. And then we will understand what our sadhana truly is. Santosha is contentment. That is the next of the niyama, to be content in the moment, to not be derailed by experiences of malcontent. So understanding that not everything is going to be what we expected it to be. Not everything is going to go the way we want it to go. Sometimes we can do the most amazing work. We can work really hard. We can study very hard for a test, but then there's that one question that we just weren't quite prepared for. We can't always cover all the bases. It's just not possible. So we need to practice compassion with ourselves about that and acknowledge that the importance is in the work done, not in the outcome. And Krishna speaks about this very clearly in the Bhagavad Gita. It's exactly what he said to Arjuna. He said, you have the right to the work only. You do not have the right to the outcome. The outcome is uncontrollable. It is the result of a series of energies and consequences to those energies. So in some way, we can find that very appealing. We can say, well, if I can be free from the outcome, if I can cultivate deep faith and free myself from concern about the outcome, then maybe the process of the work itself can become so much more enjoyable. I can be content there. I can just be content in the work. And that can be its own reward. That can be the offering that I'm making. That can be the joy of the moment. So contentment. And the greatest contentment is to have peace in the heart, is to have peace in our heart. So anything in our life that disturbs our peace needs to be looked at, Because peace is being able to receive life as it happens. It's not that you'll never cry. It's not that you'll never experience a little bit of frustration, but it'll have a different tone to it. It won't be the end all, be all, end all. We'll be able to welcome whatever human emotions come without latching onto them. The next is tapas. Tapas is discipline, and that goes hand in hand with every one of the yamas and the niyamas that we've spoken of so far. Tapas is the discipline, the compassionate discipline, to cause ourselves to be self-responsible, to look at the behaviors that need to be altered and changed in our life, and to do so, to sit in meditation when we don't want to make the time, to go to temple, to read the Bhagavad Gita, to do your studies, to put the phone down, to turn off Facebook, so that you have more time. The tapas is what brings us to that point, the discipline. So that's something that needs to be cultivated within each one of us, but not as a hard, cold experience, but as a compassionate experience, understanding that this is the way you've been trained throughout this life. This is the difficulty, is to overcome these habits of avoidance, these habits of denial. And tapas is what will bring us there. And the greatest tapas that we can commit to is to offer it all up, offer it all to God, offer it all to Goddess, and keep nothing for yourself. And in that regard, you'll see the value of doing the work, the value of the offering, and you'll be free to enjoy and to be happy. Svadhyaya is the next. And I want to stop in just a moment for the Q&A portion of this, but just briefly, Svadhyaya is a very beautiful niyama. They all are, but this is self-study. This is self-study. And Shankaracharyaji's the Tattva Bodha, the inquiry of true self-knowledge, right? Self-study. Who am I really? Who am I beyond my thoughts and opinions of myself? Who am I beyond the little tiny stories that I attach myself to? Who am I in light of the Bhagavad Gita, in light of the Bible, or whatever other book it happens to be that you study? Who am I in the light of that, rather than in the light of my own ego, of my own unhealthy ego? When your ego is healthy, it's a fine thing. It's when the ego is unhealthy that it is an issue. And in the light of an unhealthy ego, we are always lacking. We're always chasing. We're always trying to get something from outside of ourselves to define ourselves better. But in the light of self-study, in the light of discovery of the self, we find we don't need anything outside of ourself to identify who and what we really are. And instead, we just need to go deeper within, deeper within. Swadhyaya, everything in life is an opportunity to go deeper within. And then finally, the 10th and the 5th of the niyamas and the 10th of the virtues is the Ishvara Pranidhana. And this is devotion. This is devotion to divinity. This is your sadhana, moving from that initial place of once a week, once a day, to being the life that you are experiencing, to being the essence of your entire experience of life. This Ishvara Pranidhana, this love of God, it's when your heart is constantly filled, constantly brought into this place of devotional relationship. It's very hard to be in that place unless the other 9 are being actively worked on. If we are avoiding or ignoring the violence in our own life, then it's very difficult to have a sincere devotional relationship to Source. So practice all of the yamas and niyamas on a regular basis and see that as your practice. See it as your opportunity to dive deeper into your relationship with God, Goddess, with that, whatever name you call that, whatever avatar you have chosen. And then let these 10 virtues, let them guide you through the rest of your life in a way that is empowering not only to you, but to all those around you who might also need an example to follow, who might also need a reprieve from their fear of your behavior, who might also need a reminder that the truth of the self is deeper and more profound than our behaviors often allow us to see and realize. So with that, I will invite Sophie back, and she will lead us in a Q&A session in case anybody has questions. Yes, welcome back, Sophie.
Thank you so much. That was such a beautiful session. Thank you so much. You know, it's always good to be reminded of the basics and the source and the scriptures, which is where it all is really at. So thank you so much for that lovely talk. We already have 2 questions, actually. It's from the same person. This is someone who regularly joins us. Says it's a longish question. That's okay.
That's okay.
There are things in relationships, even basic interactions with people who we aren't related to, but either sometimes, regularly or frequently, we interact with. People often use diplomacy to play mind games to get the upper hand in situations. They play politics, and when such relationships break, they just quietly leave, ignore people. It's what they call ghosting these days, or pretending they didn't hear the other person, or pretend that they don't know the other. And this is a very difficult circumstance. So how do you view such situations within the context of speaking the untruth or causing violence or shaucha? I don't understand that, but okay, there's a little more to this question. People on the receiving end are left in the dark, made to suffer, not knowing where their relationship is at, while giving the other person the benefit of the doubt that they must be busy, etc., and experience it as a betrayal of trust, backstabbing. It's very intense. Yeah, so that's the question. And there's a little bit continued in the next also, if you just want to read it. I don't know if I should be reading all of this, but you get the gist, I'm pretty sure.
And I don't see the, I am not seeing the chat in there, I don't think.
It's not in the chat, it's in the Q&A column.
Oh, where would I find that at?
At the bottom, Q&A.
Oh, okay, there we go, there we go. Very good, very good.
So it's like 3 questions from the same person.
Okay, so let's just start at the top. First of all, this question is asked so often. This is a very human question. It really is. This dilemma is something that every single human being is likely to relate to. So I first just want to say that one shouldn't feel that there's something wrong with them because they're feeling this way. This is very, very human. And I think that all people put such deep expectations into the behaviors of other people that they have a difficult time when those people don't live up to their expectations. But let's just take a look for a moment at what the teachings tell us. Number one, each and every one of us has been developed in our own humanity according to karma. Karma in past lives and karma in this life. And we will continue to be developed based on karma, karmic reconciliation and karmic creation. Therefore, each and every one of us is walking through life in a particular way, facing particular energies within ourselves, because every moment, whether we know it or not, is an opportunity to either reconcile a karma or to not reconcile it, to carry it a little bit further as a continuation of burden. Because each one of us is walking this path of life according to the karmas that we ourselves have created, it's very difficult for us to have expectations that everybody should behave in a uniform way. Everybody should be honest. Well, of course, everybody should be honest, but shoulda, coulda, woulda, it doesn't really account for very much. We need to look at the individuals around us and say, instead of the way they should act, is look at them all and say, each single person here is, number one, the product of karma. Number two, carrying a heart that is seeking its own dharma. But that intention is covered over quite a bit. It's concealed quite a bit because of the weight of karma. And number three, they have a different understanding, a different expectation, a different fear than I do, based on what their karmas are. My Guruji, Swami Adhyatmananda Ji of the Shivananda lineage, he would always say, MYOB. And I used to giggle when he would say that because it just sounds so simple. But in our interactions with other people, we should MYOB, mind our own business. We should not have expectations of other people because there's the should, right? If we choose to have fewer expectations of other people, then in their own humanness and in their own fear and in their own inability, they will not let us down as often. But it's not to say I don't care about what other people do or say, it's to say I have compassion. I understand that this person has a tendency to ghost because they don't have the skill to be communicating. They don't have the skill to be consistent. They have not cultivated the skill. So how can I say I want this person to show up in this particular way for me when they don't have the skill to? That would be like me bringing just any person off of the street into my house, say a 13-year-old, and saying, I want you to fix my broken stove. They don't have the skill. So how can they do anything with it? They're just going to look at it and be overwhelmed by the concept of it. And then that's going to cultivate fear in their own hearts and minds. So then you go back to ahimsa and you say, what is the least violent, the least harmful way that I can interact in this relationship is to be honest, but not honest in a way that is derogatory. You could, if you chose, say to the person very straightforwardly, when these behaviors come to the surface, I view them as being hurtful to me. It hurts my feelings. So I would like the opportunity to talk about it if you're open to that. Self-responsibility, svadhyaya, self-study. Why do I feel this way when this person behaves that way? And how can I come into a greater understanding of what might be driving them? I know some people will say, well, some people are just irresponsible. This is true. All people are irresponsible. Without exception, people are irresponsible. That's also part of our human nature. And we will hide from the truth when we're able to, because that's also part of our habitual behavior. Habitual behaviors that don't support us. But here's the thing. The more energy you put into the way that this person is behaving, the more energy you invest in any anger that you might feel at this person, in any resentment that you might feel at this person, that's energy that you are not putting into accepting that they are on a karmic path, accepting that they are suffering, accepting that in time they will change. They don't have a choice in that. We all change. It's the nature of things. And it's energy that you're also not putting into your relationship with divinity. People on the receiving end are left in the dark, but that is their choice to be left in the dark. And it absolutely is freedom, right? This is the freedom, the free will that we have to behave as we will in our relationships. We can say, I have noticed that there is this tendency that I perceive as being hurtful. When you behave like that, I will remove myself because I won't be subject to that type of behavior. You're not telling them that, this is all on you. You're taking responsibility for how you will. You're bearing healthy boundaries and creating healthy boundaries that have real consequences to them. And then it gives the person the opportunity to knowingly choose if they are willing to change or not. If they are willing to change or not. So the cultivation of healthy boundaries is really important also. But healthy boundaries where there's self-responsibility. I'm doing this for myself, not because I hate you or I'm mad at you, but because when this behavior arises, whether in this relationship or any other, I don't feel good. It hurts my feelings. And I, in this moment, don't have the skill to overcome that. So I'm going to step back instead and just say there needs to be more distance. There's many teachings out there that say there's a type of indifference which is not a psychological issue, right? There's indifference and non-attachment, that's a psychological challenge. But then there is true indifference. There is true equanimity. And that is to be like the reed in the wind, to be the reed in the wind, and to not have expectations that one should be moved a certain way in this life or not moved in a certain way in this life, to be the witness of the journey of others rather than the one who dictates what their journey should be. And that's really hard. And I understand that. I do. But it's very helpful if we can even work with that a little bit, because then it gives the other person, just think about that for a moment, confrontational energy with other people over their behaviors cultivates a sense of fear in that person for further confrontation. And so they're investing their energy in that fear rather than changing themselves as they normally would change in time anyway. So I want to see if there's any other questions. And I hope that I answered some of this. Is it safe to chant those mantras in the middle of nasty thoughts? You're suggesting chanting mantra. Of course it is, absolutely. This is beautiful story. There is a man who is in prison, and he's in prison for murder. He's in prison for murder. And he goes to a person at the prison, and he said to him, I've had this awareness of my own self while I've been here, and I want to start chanting. I don't know what to chant though. And so this person, this attendant, goes off to his guru, and he says, I have this person who's in jail. He's in jail for murder, something very seriously. And he wants me to suggest a mantra to him. But I'm not comfortable with this, because isn't there something wrong with that? And the guru said to him, you tell him to chant Mara. You tell him to chant Mara. Mara, death. That is what his heart knows in this moment of life, is death. So you tell him to chant Mara, 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 and you tell him to chant it quickly. And the more quickly he chants it, the more the letters will become reversed and Mara will become Rama. And you will take an individual, the mantra will take an individual who literally has had their heart darkened by such a horrendous violent act. And in their heart, they will be purified by the power of Ram. So yes, when you are having those thoughts, it is absolutely imperative that you change the quality of the mind and bring it to to something holy, to something holy.
I think there's two new questions. We have from Dhananjay Ji, who's saying, are these 10 parts stated in a single stanza or any text, like, for example, the Bhagavad Gita?
Throughout the Bhagavad Gita, yes. So Sri Krishna explicates the yamas and the niyamas to Arjuna in several of the chapters in the Bhagavad Gita. And in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, they are laid out in several consecutive sutras. In the second chapter, I believe it is. So I apologize, that just went out of my head. But yes, they are. And they are defined clearly in there as well. Yes, so they are. And then the final question, go ahead, Sophia.
Oh, thank you. Rajesh Ji is first of all saying thank you for this very valuable discourse. These 10 steps are so important and necessary to get oneself started on the spiritual path. So his question is unconditional love and compassion towards all beings, equanimity, and so on. Are necessary to progress on the spiritual path, but our mind is always judging, choosing, liking and disliking, etc. So what is your advice on how to deal with these tendencies?
It's a wonderful question. And I would just like to say that these 10 steps are absolutely imperative for the beginner, for the intermediate, and for those who consider themselves advanced students, because we are very complicated onions. We are not just one layer of being. I am in my 59th year. I have 59 years of programming, 59 years of experiences, 59 years of layer upon layer upon layer of perception and impression. And these teachings are working through those layers. So we should never feel that we are, well, I've learned ahimsa, I've got that one down, because there's always another layer that it needs to be applied to. And so I see that somebody took the question and put it into
sorry, I didn't just to mark it as answered. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. I just wanted to reread the second half of the statement. So can you, Sophia, just say that to me one more time, the second half of that?
Asking is, how does one deal with these tendencies? Because they can be very powerful also. So anxiety, fear, how do you think you can deal with this?
Yes. The concept of unconditional love and compassion. It's very difficult at first because we don't believe in the power that it has. We've been told other things in life, and we've been educated and programmed, to have more faith in medicine than we do in the power of love, to have more faith in our anger than we do in the power of peace. Difficult. But the first thing that we can do is simply be present to it. Thich Nhat Hanh has a very beautiful meditation on anger. And he says he was dealing with his anger, with this anger that he felt, given his history in Vietnam. And he would sit there, and when the anger started to arrive, he would pay attention to it. He would welcome it. He wouldn't send it out to anybody else. He kept it, and he would notice what it did to him. He'd say, anger is arriving, and I feel my toes and fingers tingling. I feel the hair on my skin starting to stand up. I feel my temperature increasing. He would witness the arrival of anger, and then he would hold a space for it and allow it to be there. He would stop trying to get rid of it. He would stop trying to push it away. The act of pushing something away doesn't resolve it. The act of being present to something, compassionately present to it, accepting it, understanding that there's a reason for it, even if we will never completely know what that reason is, that's an act of love. That's an act of compassion. It's an act of compassion toward our own emotions, toward our own life experience and the suffering that has brought about for us and for others. So to be present and to welcome, as Rumi would say, to welcome all that comes to me as a guest in this house, this body house, this mind house, to throw none away, because there's unresolved work to be done there. The moment that we name something, the moment that we see something clearly, the moment that we accept it, a great change happens. And suddenly there's more space within us, because it's almost as if that ghost has been resolved, and of its own accord, it softens. It softens. The anxiety will soften. The anger will soften. The negative thoughts will soften. If you're actively choosing to be present to them initially, and then to what they evolve into as you're applying love and compassion to the situation. So let me see if I can give you an example. There was a person in my past who was very difficult, and I didn't really want to run into this person because I felt like it was always a confrontation, and I didn't have anything against this person, but it was an argumentative relationship. But I knew that I was going to run into this person at an event that I was going to. And so I spent a lot of time ahead of this event preparing myself. Well, if this person comes to me and says this, then I'll say that. If this person comes to me and says this, then I'll say that. If this person comes to me and looks at me a certain way, then I'll look back this way. And I stopped myself. And what am I doing? I don't even know what's going to happen. There's a small chance I won't even see this person. There's a small chance they won't even say anything or even look at me. So why am I investing all of this energy in trying to dictate something that I have no control over the outcome? So I sat and I meditated with that for a bit of time. It was a very troublesome relationship to me. And what I came away with was, if I do encounter this person, I'm just going to breathe. I'm just going to say hi. If they say anything, say hi. I'm just going to remain as calm as I can and face whatever comes. Sure enough, day came, and I was walking across the field. It was a festival. I was walking across the field, and the other person was walking directly at me. We were both teaching at that festival. This was many, many years ago. And the person walked up to me very close into my face. And as they got closer, I could feel the anger. I could feel the hairs on my skin starting to rise up. I could feel the tingling in my fingers and toes, and that my breath was getting shallow because I was expecting a confrontation. And the person looked at me and said, "How are they setting you up on stage? They have to set me up the exact same way on stage. There can be no differences in the way that either one of us are treated." Very upset, very worried, very fearful. And I just kept deepening my breath. And what I saw in that moment was someone who was afraid. What I saw in that moment was someone who felt like they lacked so much out because they didn't want to be seen as less than. And in that moment, my heart really just went out to this person. And I said, "The sound person's name is so-and-so. Just go talk to them. They'll give you whatever you need. No problem. Have a great class." And I walked away. And I kid you not, in that moment, as I was walking away, there was such a relief. There was such a shedding of tension and anxiety. My breath got so deep. It was a very profound experience. So why I'm telling you that story is to say, treat your thoughts and your tendencies and other people in the same way. Breathe deeper, hold a space for them, give them the opportunity to be something other than what you think they are, other than what you have already judged them to be. And maybe they will surprise you, and maybe you will surprise yourself too. Sophia.
Thank you so much. That, I think, is great advice. Thank you so much. Also, Rajesh ji is saying, thank you, Rajesh ji. So just to remind everyone that all of our sessions are recorded. So if you want to revisit this beautiful session by Shraddha ji or share it with anyone, the recording will be available on Indica Yoga's website as well as Indica Yoga's YouTube channel. Before we leave, Shraddha ji, would you like to share any email or website if any of our participants would like to get in touch with you or find out about the work you're doing? Koti ji, will you please share this in the chat with everyone? Can you please share the details, Shraddha ji?
Absolutely. So I am Swamini Shraddhananda Saraswati, and I am a female monk in the Shivananda lineage. I'm located in Reading, Pennsylvania, although right now I'm in Ireland. And in Reading, Pennsylvania, we have developed an ashram called Kula Kamala Foundation, or Kula Kamala Foundation. And that's KULA Foundation. And the website is the same, www.kulakamalafoundation.org. I'm on Facebook and I'm very active on there, always posting spiritual conversations and whatnot. So you can always friend me or follow me there as well. And yes, and I would also love, I talked to Sophia ahead of time and she said it would be okay that we're going to send you all just a little one sheet about today's conversation, something you could possibly put up on your refrigerator if you wanted to as a check. You know, have I thought about ahimsa today? Have I thought about asteya today? And so we'll have this little running list for you as a little gift and thank you. Yeah, and there we go.
Thank you so much, Shraddha ji. So yes, that was actually, I was saying that as the last announcement. We're going to get this beautiful surprise from Shraddha ji, and we will make sure as soon as she sends it to me that it will be emailed to all of our participants today. Koti ji has also put up the link to Shraddha ji's website in the chat box. So that's where you can reach out to her anytime you like. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Shraddha ji, thank you so much for taking the time to join the session all the way from the States. We really appreciate that and we really love you. Thank you so much. And for all our participants, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much, Koti ji, for all your help. And I hope I see all of you next Friday again for our next session of Yoga Insights. Have a beautiful weekend. Thank you. Oh, and Happy New Year. This was our first session for the new year, and it was such a positive, happy session. Thank you so much. Namaste.
Namaste. Hari Om, everyone. Hari Om. Be well and be happy. Thank you.